Only 7 games left. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Podcast, the podcast where you don't, I do Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom, and unfortunately the Packers aren't playing in one of them, Grossi, and today we are going to be breaking down and predicting each of the 4 games in the divisional round of the playoffs. It is often said that the divisional round is the best weekend in football, and we got some fun matchups this weekend and potentially setting up an all-timer for conference championships next week. Last week, I went an abysmal 2-4. I only got the freaking Broncos and Bills game and the Steelers and Ravens game right. And so unfortunately, a rough start to the postseason, but I'm hoping to bounce back on top. And starting off with game number 1, you got the Houston Texans taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. And holy crap, man, how about those freaking Texans? The Texans, we were talking about this on predictions last week, that they definitely had a shot against the LA Chargers, but the Chargers were definitely favored going into it. And one of the major reasons why was, of course, the Chargers defense and just the way that offense from the Strouds has been playing as of late. The offensive line hasn't been that great. Of course, they're missing 2 of their top receivers. And ultimately, I was concerned how they're going to be able to move the ball. And honestly, in the beginning, I was right, in which you had 2 turnovers. You had a fumble on their first opening possession. Then you had an interception by CJ Stroud. But it was that Texans defense, which was absolutely phenomenal. And even though the Texans wound up with 3 turnovers during that game, they forced 4. And so now they are going to be moving on and taking on the Kansas City Chiefs, who have been on a bye week for, I don't know, since freaking Christmas at this time. And it's always interesting to see how the narrative about the Chiefs changes when we get into the postseason. Because after last year's postseason, where I doubted the Chiefs for a hot second like a big stupid idiot, I was proven wrong. And I was like, you know what? Their real season doesn't begin until the playoffs start. And now, here we are. They're in the divisional round, the number 1 seed. Everything is going through Arrowhead. And they have a pretty fortunate matchup against the Houston Texans. The good news for the Chiefs, besides having that break, is that Jalen Watson is expected to return as well, which will be a big boost for that secondary. And ultimately for the Chiefs, this is their game to lose. And what I mean by that is pretty much every game is theirs to lose. They're the back-to-back Super Bowl champs, and while their offense hasn't played up to some expectations, they are still a fantastic football team. They've only lost 2 games, 1 game with their starters, and ultimately the Chiefs have that experience in their head coach, their QB, their tight end, and a litany of other players on that squad that have that playoff experience and know what it's like to play in these high-pressure games. However, going up against the Texans is an interesting matchup because, as we've been talking about the Texans, the most consistent thing has been their defense all season. And if that Texans D shows up like it did against LA, it could be a tough time to move that ball for Patrick Mahomes and that offense. On top of that, the Texans pass rush is pretty damn good, and who knows, if they make Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable, the Texans definitely have a shot. However, with all things considered, I have to go with the Kansas City Chiefs here. I would love to be proven wrong, but ultimately, I just think they are the better team. They are playing at Arrowhead, which will be a significant home field advantage. And with CJ Stroud and that offense having a slow start against the Chargers, they can definitely not afford to do it here. They're going to have to be playing at their very best. And even then, I don't know if it's going to be enough with those missing wide receivers and their lack of productivity on offense. So I'm going with Kansas City to get a win, going to the AFC Championship game once again. But listen, as the Texans take on the Chiefs this Saturday, I got a feeling a whole lot of America is going to be pulling for the Strouds.
America can, should, must, and will blow up the moon.
No moon. Then you got a divisional matchup within the divisional round. You got the Green Bay mother-loving Packers taking on the Detroit Lions. The Packers were able to dispatch the Eagles with no problems, winning that game 54-3. Jordan Love threw 8 touchdowns. Oh, sorry about that. Had to work on scripted for 14 hours. Must have just fallen asleep. What game is next? Oh, You got the Washington Commanders taking on the Detroit Lions. The Commanders were able to get a game-winning field goal that doinked in and punched their ticket to Detroit, defeating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and holy crap, what a game. That was the best game we saw all wild card weekend. Jaden Daniels was absolutely phenomenal, and while it looked like the Buccaneers were going to be able to put that game away, an untimely fumble allowed the Commanders to get it. They eventually scored, and hey, now Wildflower has a playoff win. And for the Commanders, I am super duper happy for their fans. I've talked about this for years, ever since 2020, when we were really starting to make content about the Commanders with Wildflower starting up. Just having Dan Snyder as your owner and just that dark cloud hanging over your organization for all of those years, I am so happy that not only have they gotten rid of him, but now they have their franchise quarterback. They're doing well with his first season, and hey, you won a frickin' playoff game, and it's all house money from here. They're going to be taking on the Detroit Lions, the number 1 seeded Detroit Lions. And here, we're just going to have to see if Jaden Daniels can beat Goff.
Let's beach off.
Anyone who wants to beach him off has to beach me off first.
I will beach both of you off at the same time.
The Lions getting themselves a well-deserved break after destroying the Minnesota Vikings, who then got destroyed by the LA Rams, and they're getting healthier. Dave Montgomery expected to be back this Saturday. Also, some defenders might be coming back as well. And ultimately for the Lions, they have it all in front of them. This should be a very fun matchup, and I know that Lions fans want some revenge for the 90s and earlier beatings from the Commanders in the playoffs. But right now, just having that dynamic of Monty and Gibbs back is going to be a huge boost for that offense. We saw on the defense Anzalone coming back and how much of an impact he made against the Minnesota Vikings. And if they're getting more folks back from injury, that defense should be even better. And taking a look at this game, I would not be surprised if it is a shootout. Ultimately, I think it's going to be tough for the Commanders to stop this rushing attack of the Lions, especially when you have 2 great running backs. But it's really going to come down to Jaden Daniels and how he is going to play. I am very curious to see how Detroit's D-line is going to match up with Jaden Daniels, as he's going to be running all over the place. And ultimately, that connection with Scary Terry could be the difference maker. And especially if they're able to establish the run against Detroit, this could wind up being a very close game. But ultimately, I do think the Lions have a major edge here. Not only are they playing in Ford Field, but like I said, getting folks back from injury. I just think the Lions could put up more points than the Commanders. And like I said, if they're able to control time of possession, they ran all over the Minnesota Vikings. I think they can run over the Commanders. And so because of that, for the second year in a row, I think the Detroit Lions will be going to the NFC Championship game, and they will be 1 game away from the Super Bowl. Can they do it? And for the Commanders, it's been a hell of a ride. Following that, we got our Sunday matchups as the LA Rams take on the Philadelphia Eagles. The Rams, holy crap, man, 9 sacks on Sam Darnold. They allowed 9 points. And honestly, I think this is how Sam Darnold is feeling after seeing that Rams pass rush.
I see dead people.
I'm so sorry, Sam Darnold. But ultimately, the purple incarnation of Satan was extinguished, was exorcised from the postseason, going 1 and done, just like my beloved Green Bay Packers. And for the Rams, obviously, there was a ton of emotion heading into that game with everything going on in California right now. And the Rams, they rose to the occasion. Their defensive line, their pass rush was phenomenal on Monday Night Football. Matthew Stafford was moving the ball pretty darn well against that Vikings defense. But ultimately, it was the pass rush of the Rams that got the job done, because the Vikings, they just had no answer for it. They're going to be going up against a much better offensive line this week in the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles able to come away with a win against the Green Bay Packers. Saquon Barkley had himself a day. He also could have broke one, but decided to slide down instead to run the clock out. But that defense was really the reason why they won that football game. They were able to force 4 turnovers, including 3 interceptions from Jordan Love, and of course the opening kickoff fumble, which it's okay, we won't talk about it anymore. But the Eagles offense really struggled to move the ball, or at least convert it into points against the Packers, because it was just a 10-0 game after 3 turnovers after the half. And that is a little bit concerning. Nakobe Dean also unfortunately getting brutally injured during that game. I know the Packers had a laundry list of injury, but unfortunately for Dean, it looks like he could miss a chunk of the 2025 season, if not the entire thing, which is honestly devastating because he's been a nice rising star there. And while that's definitely going to be a loss for their defense, I don't think the Eagles defense is going to lose any of its potency. They still have one of the best, if not the best secondary in football. Their defensive line is monstrous. They can stop the run, and I think it might be a tough day for Matthew Stafford, because if that pass rush does disrupt him, I think that offense of the Rams is going to struggle to move the football. Now, the way we talked about the Rams beating the Vikings, are they going to be able to get it done with the pass rush against this offensive line? That is the ultimate question. While I do believe in Jared Verse, who has had a phenomenal rookie year, and a bunch of others on the defensive line who have been pivotal in having such a great pass rush, I don't think they're going to be able to turn in a repeat performance from what we saw on Monday. I know Monday was crazy, but if they're able to get some pressure after Jalen Hurts and cause him to make some mistakes, then you got a shot. The last time that these two teams played, Saquon Barkley ran all over the LA Rams. The Rams cannot have that happen this week if they want to get away with a win. And so because of that being played in Philadelphia, I am going to have to go with the Eagles. I think it's going to be real tough to stop Saquon Barkley, and even if you do and limit him to, I don't know, just 100 yards, it is going to be difficult to move the ball against this Eagles defense. So ultimately, I'm going with Philadelphia, which means we would get an Eagles and Lions NFC Championship game, and from there, we'll see who's going to the Super Bowl. And finally, the game that we have all been waiting for. You got the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Buffalo Bills. Oh boy, the Bills, Ravens, they are finally going to be meeting once again on Sunday. Though their fans, they've been fighting with each other all year, trying to figure out who's going to be MVP.
This is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. I think you and I are destined to do this forever.
And a lot of talk is going on about this game, not only because I think it is the game of the weekend, potentially the game of the year, but the last time that these two teams played, the Ravens dominated the Buffalo Bills. The Bills were trying to run some trick plays. It did not work out. Derrick Henry ran all over them for 199 yards. However, a lot of things have changed since then. One, we're talking about the Ravens. Their defense has gotten much better, especially in their secondary after mixing around their safeties a bit. On top of that, looking at the Bills, they were missing multiple starters. Their linebackers look completely different. They finally got Matt Milano back and Bernard into this game. Taron Johnson also wasn't available in that week 4 matchup. He's back, even though he suffered an injury last week against the Broncos. He was able to come back in that game. And this should be a fantastic game. The Buffalo Bills, they were able to take care of the Broncos last week. And even though the Broncos had that great opening drive, that is literally the only thing they were able to do all day against that defense. And for the Bills, the number one thing is going to be stopping Derrick Henry. If he's going to be rushing for 150, 160 yards against you, it is going to be a very long day. But on top of just the defense, this Bills offense looks different from what they saw against Baltimore earlier this year. Shakir wound up leaving that game against the Ravens. He's now back and healthy. Cooper wasn't even on the team at that point. And while Cooper has been quiet, this is the game that he has to try and make an impact. So ultimately, you're getting the Bills at somewhat full strength. Von Miller is looking better, and taking on a Ravens team who was able to take care of business against their division rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers, this past Saturday. And the Ravens, they looked pretty dominant. Unfortunately, Zay Flowers did not play in that game, and like I said, we'll see if he's going to wind up playing on Sunday night. I'm glad that he's going to have an extra night to potentially play because, hey, you want these teams at full strength just as a football fan. And for the Ravens, they're going to be going into a hostile environment. I imagine Orchard Park is going to be rocking on Sunday night, but if they stick to their game plan and are able to get Derrick Henry going like they did in the first game, I think their chances are pretty darn good of winning this football game. Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen are going back and forth on who's going to win MVP, and even though that's already been decided because the playoffs don't count, this is just a spectacle of football that I cannot wait to witness. So whoever winds up winning this game, they're going to likely go up against the Kansas City Chiefs unless the Texans pull off a win, and that is going to be one hell of an AFC Championship game. For the Ravens, are they going to get away from their identity about running the football? God, I hope not, because they did last year in the AFC Championship game. For the Bills, they have it all in front of them once again. They have a home game. They got the 2 seed. Their players are mostly healthy. Can they get this done and go and knock off the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game? These are the questions. And honestly, and I know this is triggering for Bills fans, I'm sorry, it really is a coin flip. I can see the Ravens establishing the run, Lamar Jackson running all over the Buffalo Bills, and the Ravens being able to get a win here. I can also see the Bills defense stepping up and limiting Derrick Henry and then forcing Lamar Jackson to throw the ball. And if Zay Flowers is not available, you're going to be targeting guys like Mark Andrews and Bateman, who are very good, but maybe not as dynamic in the passing game. And ultimately, with that defensive line of the Ravens, they've been phenomenal at stopping the run. James Cook, who has had an incredible season. We're going to see if the Bills can have a balanced offense against this Ravens defense, or if it's just going to be Josh Allen doing Josh Allen things. And so right now, even though my mind is telling me, Tom, pick the Baltimore Ravens, I'm gonna go with the Buffalo Bills. And I know this might blow up in my face, but I just got a feeling. I'm gonna go with my gut. I think the Bills are going to be able to pull this game off. Hell, it might come down to a Justin Tucker or a Tyler Bass field goal, which will have both fan bases holding their breath. But ultimately, I'm going to go with the Bills to get a win in front of their home crowd. If the Bills are able to stop Derrick Henry and Zay Flowers doesn't play, I think the Bills have a pretty good chance of winning this football game. Again, this could blow up completely because if Derrick Henry just starts rushing all over the place, I think the Ravens do win, especially if they're able to limit James Cook on the other side of the ball. But I'm going with the Bills to get the big time win. Do not let me down. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who do you think is winning these divisional round matchups? I'll be streaming all of them once again. Let's enjoy these last few games, folks. Football is almost gone. But let me know. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy, all social media, see down below. A big shout out and thank you to all the Patreon and YouTube members for supporting this channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack, go.